Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, and maybe the iPhone as well. I'm Ryan McCaffrey in the host chair this week, filling in for Damon, and I am joined this week by Rebekah Valentine to my right from IGN's Nintendo podcast, Nintendo Voice Chat, and remotely Destin Legarie from our Xbox show, Podcast Unlocked. Hello to both of you.
Howdy.
Hello. iPhone Day. Talking about iPhone.
Yes.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
The iPhone 15 Pro specifically has Apple's making a big push into proper, full-on, quote-unquote, console gaming here. They demoed a couple of games running on a television right off the phone or just play right on a phone. Resident Evil 4 Remake being one of them. Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is coming up soon, being another. And so, you know, the question is for us here, is the iPhone now going to be a viable, quote-unquote, next-gen gaming platform? And there's a few different pieces to this. Reb, I want to start with you. Let's start with the price point here, because Capcom came out and announced this week that the Resident Evil 4 Remake for iPhone is coming out very, very soon. And it will be $60, which is not quite an order of magnitude higher than any mobile game has ever been, but it is a multiple of any price I've ever seen for a mobile game. They tend to be $1 or free, or Nintendo went into this with some $10 games, and that didn't really end super well for them in terms of what they said. They said their expectations were not really met for this. So let's start with the price point. Reb, what do you make of $60? Is this something that the market is either going to immediately or eventually accept?
It's an interesting question, because I do think the context that this needs is that you are getting not just the iPhone version for that $60. You're getting the Mac version as well, and it also plays on iPad. So you are, by order of equivalency, is effectively getting a kind of a PC version, like you're playing it on a computer that you have, but then you can also play it on your iPhone. And so if you're thinking of it in isolation, like this is just for an iPhone version, it is a little shocking, because, you know, what you said, mobile gaming, the market has built itself around free-to-play games and games that are relatively inexpensive or tied to subscription services. It is interesting to take it in isolation like that, because it feels like Apple is seeing this as an opportunity to start having conversations about mobile gaming in the same spheres as console gaming. I can get into this later, but I think mobile gaming has been in the same technological vicinity as console gaming for a long time, and certainly in the same like gameplay conversation, but we as gamers don't tend to talk about them in the same breath. They are isolated audiences for a number of different complex reasons. So this to me says that Apple is willing to start suggesting to people that these be treated as equivalent things, and whether or not people pick that up or not, I think a market will pick it up. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the market that listens to this podcast.
Well, that part may be true, but we do all have smartphones in our pockets, so we can certainly look at it from where other sort of more just casual gamers are sitting who do like to play games on their phones, and from where we as hardcore gamers sit. Destin, your thoughts on the $60 price point that Capcom is asking here for a what is promised to be a full, proper, quote-unquote, console version of RE4 Remake?
I think the people that watch this show and the gaming community that we hear from on Twitter/X and just online generally, I think they don't give the iPhone platform enough credit. For example, this is Call of Duty running on a phone, and you may write it off, but you can pair a controller to it, and you're basically playing something that graphically is comparable to where the 360 is currently. And knowing that Call of Duty can push it that far with enough budget and make the kind of money that they're making, knowing that Diablo Immortal can basically release a full-on Diablo video game. They just had a new character reveal for that product, and they're making a lot of money, says to me that there's a huge market for the mobile audience that often gets discredited by the gaming community at large as, oh, people just play Bejeweled and Farmville on it. That's like such an old way of thinking. What the phone is capable of, especially with the iPhone 15, is incredibly impressive. And if we start looking forward to the iPhone 17, when you're going to have an install base of like, let's guess 120 million people, sure, it's a multifaceted device. But if you get a fraction of the percentage of those people converted into gaming, and a lot of them game, I play Marvel Snap almost every day, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money on the table, and everybody in the industry, PlayStation and Microsoft and others, are building up mobile divisions to capitalize on this huge new growth opportunity for them.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about the console makers starting to see mobile as the next financial frontier. I guess
Nintendo.
Yeah, well, they went there, and now they've kind of pulled it back a little bit. But what I want to pose to both of you specifically before we get to the next piece of this is the psychological barrier of $60 for a mobile game, and whether or not there is one. I'm of the opinion that there is, but this week I'm in the host chair, so I don't really get to debate about it, and that's fine. But I'm curious, the two of you. Destin, I'll start with you first, because I think you feel a little differently about this than I do. Do you think that the mobile gamer who's used to a free-to-play game or a game that's maybe $1 or something with microtransactions that comes at a very low upfront cost, is that customer going to be willing to spend $60 for something, regardless of the quality of the game, even if it's a console quality game? Is $60 a bridge too far for that gamer?
Well, if I'm dropping $1,700 on an iPhone 15 Pro Max, I don't think $60 is that big of a deal. Or if you're dropping $1,000 even on the Pro model, like, these phones are ridiculously expensive. So if you're talking about a full-fledged experience that not only works on your phone, it works on your iPad, it works on your Mac, and you're in that ecosystem, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But with all those layers, you are reducing the install base in some respects, where most likely most people are not going to have all three of those devices. They'll just have one. But on the other perspective of the situation, you also have like 40 million sales of the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, 47 million, sorry. So let's assume the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max is similar, because it's been very popular and widely talked about. Then you start stacking on the people who can access these games on their iPad just by pairing a controller, and the people on Mac who can do the same just by pairing a controller. You now have a very large install base. And if you compare that to where PlayStation is today, they're at 40 million PlayStation 5s in 3 years. You're talking about just the phone having an install base of 47 million in 1 year. The only question is, as it's a multifaceted device, we're looking at the capabilities here, how many of those players looking to play on those devices will be converted into gamers that are willing to spend that price point?
So, Reb, I think Destin's saying that, well, with a bigger installed base, even if a smaller percentage of people are willing to pay that $60, that it could still be a success for publishers like Capcom. Your thoughts?
I think I agree with that, and I think the actual answer to the question, how many people will go for this, is somewhere in the middle of all of the people who game on mobile and no one at all. Because the other sort of factor in this is that people who are very into mobile gaming already are used to a certain structure of game. Like, certainly there are these sort of single player, singular, beginning to end, done kinds of experiences like Resident Evil is on mobile already. They certainly exist. Apple Arcade is full of them. They're great. But they're not the bulk of the mobile market. The majority of games in the mobile market are these sort of free-to-play games where you're getting in for free and then you're playing indefinitely, just for a very long time, and gradually spending small amounts of money. So in sum total, if you're playing mobile games, you've probably spent more than $60 on a lot of games already. And if you're thinking about it like that, then yeah, $60 for Resident Evil, who cares, whatever. But people aren't usually thinking about it like that, because mobile games are specifically designed in so many of these cases to help you not think about it.
Keep you on the hamster wheel, right?
Yeah, and so I think it's going to be a little bit of both, and I think the people who tend to be playing mobile games are not necessarily looking for the kind of game that Resident Evil is. That doesn't mean that they cannot be enticed, but I do think seeing that $60 upfront cost might give people pause, and a lot of people who are already really into Resident Evil are going to be playing it on other consoles already.
So go ahead, Destin, please.
Well, the other angle to look at is a lot of people bring up the price point and how it's prohibitive to get into gaming, but you can call T-Mobile today and have the new iPhone for $60. You can have the iPhone Pro. You pay $60 a month, you get your cell service and everything else. And then you're like, okay, well, I have the cool new phone. I'm in this membership for however many years they make you keep the phone to pay it off. Why not drop that money that I'm saving in my brain on a $60 game? Or maybe you can't afford the new consoles, but you've been really interested in Resident Evil and you don't have a video game console. Now you can just play it by pairing a controller. And don't forget, it's very easy to output to a television. I really see this as being a significant step for the iPhone brand into the gaming space. And this is what Phil Spencer and Xbox has been talking about for years, what Jim Ryan has been talking about, and why they're ramping up their mobile gaming divisions in a big, big way. They've both said mobile is just one of the areas we are exploring to reach millions of gamers beyond our platforms. That's from Jim Ryan. Phil Spencer says the reason we're in the acquisition discussion with Activision Blizzard King is around their mobile capacity. That's not a line. Go look at the King revenue. Yeah. Go look at how much money these games are bringing in. It's astronomical, and it is a huge growth sector for at least PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah, Reb, to pivot to your platform of expertise here for a quick second, like, where does Nintendo fit into this? Because, you know, they did Super Mario Run, which, by the way, I paid my $10 for, and I feel like I totally got $10 worth out of that game. I've had a blast with it, but Nintendo has walked their mobile efforts back. They have said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we just didn't quite see the return we were hoping for on this. So as Sony makes inroads into mobile gaming and Microsoft spends $69 billion in large part to get a bigger foothold in mobile gaming, where does Nintendo fit in?
You know, they're so precious with their IP, and they're so careful with it. And their mobile efforts, I really enjoyed most of Nintendo's mobile games. I thought Miitomo was frankly pretty cool. Super Mario Run, the little Animal Crossing Pocket Camp game, all of those were really cool. But again, they didn't capitalize on the ecosystem that has been created around mobile gaming, which again, like, deals in this sort of largely free-to-play kind of, you're not spending tons of money up front. You're just sort of, you know, it trickles away as you know, maybe pay to get rid of ads or pay for a little perk or something like that, like little bits over time. It didn't ever fully capitalize on those kinds of things. They've seen like some small success with, they've seen decent success with Mario Kart Tour, which I believe has done well for them, but not nearly on the level of like Candy Crush or pretty much anything, Call of Duty Mobile, name your mobile game. I think eventually they are going to have to circle back around on this. I would not be surprised if Nintendo was putting its head down and saying, okay, this partnership with DNA is not working. It's the efforts we have put forth thus far are not bringing us the massive returns that other companies are seeing. How can we either build some sort of partnership that will sort of get this off of Nintendo proper's plate and let someone else handle it, or find a different strategy internally that will allow us to keep control over our IP in a way? Because, you know, Mario in like a sort of manipulative free-to-play game, I think is I don't know, it doesn't feel right to me. It feels like something Nintendo would shy away from. And I'm being very mean to mobile gaming, and I actually very much love mobile gaming. But I think they're putting their heads down and are going to try to find a unique pathway back in. But I don't think we're going to see it for a few more years.
Destin?
Yeah, Niantic obviously paid a licensing fee to do Pokemon Go, though, right, Reb? Like, how does that relationship work? I'm actually not aware of it, because that's Pokemon, and that is a massive, massive success where everybody copied that formula. So Niantic's got the formula figured out for something that works for sure. Can you elaborate on that anymore? I actually don't know the answer.
I agree with you and I disagree with you, because like in the moment and for quite a bit of time afterward, Pokemon Go certainly was the success that you're describing, and it's still doing well. It's not doing poorly, but being aware of that community, some of the enthusiasm is waning at this point. And I don't know how familiar you are with a whole bunch of the other efforts to copy that formula, but copies of that formula have not worked. There was like a Harry Potter game. There was one that was being advertised all over San Francisco for like an NBA version of it, where I guess you collected basketball players. I don't know, but nobody's talking about any of these games. And they're not working with other IP. Like Pokemon Go was an extremely unique, singular moment, and even Niantic has sort of moved on to trying to use that location-based technology in other ways. Pikmin Bloom actually is a really good Nintendo-based example where they tried to copy and it just didn't work. So I think Nintendo, being primarily a toy maker first, probably recognizes that they need to find some sort of secret spice that has this very unique Nintendo flavor that allows them to keep their reputation as this sort of silly, different toy maker that's not just copy pasting the same kinds of mobile formulas that everyone else is doing. I don't think they're interested in that. I don't like to speculate about acquisitions because everybody's usually wrong about them all the time, but I wouldn't be shocked if Nintendo decided they wanted to acquire somebody that already had mobile stuff going on and have them be their mobile house. But again, I don't know how Nintendo's IP ends up fitting into that. It's a puzzle piece that doesn't quite square, and I'm not sure how they're going to do it.
Well, that's probably an apt description of Nintendo most of the time. A puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit in, or at least we don't understand quite until Nintendo
they do it.
Makes it clear. The last piece of this that I want to bring up, speaking of puzzles, is mobile streaming versus now what Apple's pitching here, which is a native gaming experience. Destin, do you feel like Xbox Cloud, xCloud, or Sony's effort, is that going to complement this? Is that going to lead people more into this native mobile gaming or compete with it? How do you see it?
Well, one of the first games we'll be testing on the iPhone 15 is Resident Evil Village. It's coming out this October, and that was largely marketed as a PlayStation-centric title. I do realize it was multi-platform, but being able to see how good that looks just on some of the videos that we've seen out there on Twitter and on X, I have to imagine that native is going to be the way to go. The problem with streaming, and as good as it is, you can do it with both Xbox's xCloud. People are playing Starfield on their phone, and you can do it with PlayStation by having your console just stream right to your device, and then, again, pair a controller and go. The problem is the latency. No matter what platform you're using, they've gotten very good, but the latency is still noticeable. And for shooters, which is one of the bigger demographics or bigger markets that you would want to get into, that just has to not exist. Now, with it being native, that latency automatically gets cut at least in half, if not more. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. And again, this is iPhone 15. This is the first year where they're entering the ability to just have games natively running on their platform. All these questions are good questions. Will people adapt the $60 price point? And obviously, Capcom probably did studies, and most people said, yeah, I'd pay $60 to play Resident Evil, but let's see what the real world does when they are presented with this new higher price when they've been playing Diablo Immortal for free and hopefully not buying the gems or whatever.
Reb, to wrap up here, any thoughts on the game streaming piece of it as either a competitive or complementary piece?
To some of the things that Destin said, I do think it's interesting to look at this and at cloud gaming on mobile as these sort of new things, because AAA quality gaming on mobile has been there for a while. The difference is that games were being designed from the ground up for it to sort of take advantage of things like, a touch screen and the smaller screen size and things like that. So the style of games that you play on console, they haven't really made sense on mobile until now, because you would have had to just sort of do this very complex situation where you're trying to port it, but you're changing everything that you're doing and everything that's on the screen to make it palatable for people on mobile devices. The technology that we have is making it easier to just sort of wholesale bring those games over with not no effort, but not quite the level of effort that it took before to do that. And the latency is certainly a problem, but I don't know that cloud is necessarily the answer, because the whole idea around these games running on the cloud is that you're taking games that were designed for something else and now you can just sort of play them in the same way on your phone, and people aren't necessarily looking for that experience. I ultimately think that the future of gaming on mobile is still with games that are designed from the ground up for the unique quirks of that device. And maybe technology with this new iPhone and with everything else is going to keep getting us closer to something that can replicate a console experience without having to jump through a bunch of different hoops. But I'm not sure we're quite there yet, which is maybe one of the hesitancies I have about Resident Evil being an interesting game to play on a phone.
Well, yeah, Capcom and Ubisoft are kind of the two that are testing the waters here this fall with major releases that are going straight to iPhone. We'll see how that goes. All right, we've got the poll results for last week. We asked you, which of these unannounced games are you most excited for in response to the Xbox roadmap leaks? We have to go to the 10th place here. That's how close the results are. Edging out the winner here. So we have Red Dead Redemption 2's next-gen rumored update that was in that document. 26.3% of the vote. And coming in right behind it, probably what I would have personally voted for also here, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remaster at 25.6%. So less than 1% differentiating those top two results. The Fallout 3 remaster was in there, Doom Year Zero, which would also be a strong pick for me, Dishonored 3, and the Ghostwire Tokyo sequel. Again, we don't know if these are still actually going to happen, but they were planned at some point per that leaked document from Microsoft that we talked about on last week's show. The new poll for this week: how much would you pay to play a AAA console game like Resident Evil 4 Remake on your phone? Would you pay $60? Do I have to go down to 50? You going 40? Would you do 30? Maybe 20? Vote on the IGN.com homepage right now, and we will have the results for you on next week's show. And that will do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to Reb, thank you Destin, and also to Jobert behind the scenes making this happen here in our San Francisco studio. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series news, as well as maybe iPhone starts to work its way into this, and hopefully Nintendo. We hear from their next gen efforts here pretty soon. We'll see you soon ourselves.